Want to buy a baseball team? The Royals for sale? What does it mean for you and the rest of our metro? Plus, we track and dissect the rest of the week's top local stories straight ahead. Your Week in Review next.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome everyone, I'm Nick Haynes, and yes, Week in Review is back. Thank you for supporting our summer membership drive. I'm told you've now had your fill of Joe Bonamassa and Mannheim Steamroller. You've mastered all the techniques necessary to improve your memory and reverse the aging process. And now we're ready to tackle pesky local concerns again, and there's plenty of them, pouring through the news of our week and some of the stories we might have missed while we were away. Nationally syndicated columnist Mary Sanchez of the Tribune News Service. From KMBC 9 News, Chief Political Reporter Michael Mahoney, keeping tabs of the news from behind a microphone at KCMO Talk Radio, Pete Mundo, and from the pages of your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. How much would you pay to buy the Kansas City Royals? How about more than $1 billion? That's how much David Glass is expected to earn in a reported deal revealed this week, in which he would sell the team to a group led by Kansas City businessman John Sherman. It would be a massive profit for Glass, who bought the Royals for just $96 million in the year 2000. So many questions, though, remain to be answered about this and its impact on Kansas City. But let's start with why. Why is David Glass interested in selling the team in the first place?
Because he is 83, almost 84 years old. There are probably some questions about whether or not even the Glass family can swing the tax nut that would be associated with the sale. The other thing is Glass is, at 83, wants to make sure, I believe, that there is a smooth transition in terms of ownership to somebody else, unlike the rocky period between the death of Ewing Kauffman and Glass becoming the owner when the team was owned by a foundation and it really foundered.
When Lamar Hunt died, then it went to the Chiefs family. The Hunt family took over it. Dan Glass is the president of the club. Other members of the Glass family are part of the board of directors of the Royals. Why wouldn't it just fall to the family?
Well, it could, and I think the assumption for many years was that it would go to Dan Glass, and that's why David Glass purchased the team. By the way, just let me say parenthetically, the fact that we're talking about Royals ownership and I'm sitting next to Michael Mahoney on Week in Review makes me feel like I'm 40 again, because we went at each other big time when the last time that the Royals ownership changed. But I do think the fact that he's selling now to a local person reflects a desire to try and keep the team in Kansas City and to get the transaction done and that future guaranteed before illness overtakes him. Because otherwise you'd start an auction process, you'd say the team was for sale, you'd take bids from other communities that might want to get the team 10 years from now. It'd be much more messy than this appears to be.
But couldn't other bidders come forward, though? Pete, I'm just going to say there are reports right now in Las Vegas from commercial TV stations saying that #1 chance for any city to get this team is Las Vegas, and the Las Vegas bookmakers are putting #1 chances of taking the Royals.
Well, you have to remember, I mean, any of these pro sports teams, the commissioners and the leagues themselves obviously have a heavy hand, whether we like it or not, and Kansas City is the third smallest market to have a professional baseball team, so that has to be part of the conversation.
Let me just ask Mary something real quickly here about John Sherman, though. A lot of people don't know him or never heard of him. For all of the reporting you've been doing here in Kansas City, how familiar were you with him prior to this, Mary?
I was familiar with him, but more within his civic contributions, which I think is important to the conversation here, and that he's very tied to Kansas City. He's very tied to the Kauffman Foundation. He's involved with the Civic Council. His social capital, I mean, it's very broad, obviously, but it is very deeply invested in Kansas City, and that bodes well for keeping the team here, and it's also probably part of that reason for this sort of succession, to make it smooth and smart, and hopefully, I hope, to keep the Royals here.
And Mary, here's the other thing, to piggyback off that for a second, is he is already part of ownership in baseball with the Cleveland Indians. I believe he's #3. What that means is that the country club of wealthy baseball owners have already vetted him. They already have him in their club, and as Dave will remember, remember, and Mary, I'm sure, as well, when there was a gentleman by the name of Miles Prentice that came up and thought that he was going to buy the Royals, and a lot of people thought he was going to buy the Royals. That didn't happen because he basically got blackballed by ownership of the other baseball teams. There was something there. Sherman is already in the club. That makes it very likely that baseball ownership and the commissioner's office would have to ratify this, will do so if they're going to close that deal.
Just because John Sherman is from Kansas City, though, there isn't a firm commitment, though, for keeping the team here in Kansas City. He would be among a group of investors, just one of them.
Right, and we don't know how many of those investors are from Kansas City or whether they would seek to maximize the value of their investment, which goes up exponentially, Nick, if the team is movable. Now, the leases guarantee that the Royals and Chiefs will stay in Kansas City until 2031, absent a default from Jackson County, which is another issue. So any buyer would have to look at a long-range play to try and move it out of town, unless they were willing to pay liquidated damages to the county, which is possible. But Mary talked about social capital. Let me just say this quickly. Capital makes a difference here, too. This is a $1 billion purchase, and presumably John Sherman or his group would have to be prepared for operating losses year after year after year. Kansas City baseball is a very thin margin business, and so you have to be committed beyond just the money aspect if you want to keep a team here. That's why knowing his intentions are important. All the other members of the group is important, and as you point out, Las Vegas, Indianapolis, Nashville, go down the list, Charlotte, San Antonio. They're all looking at the headlines going, man, this is maybe one of the few opportunities we'll have. So this story is not completely played out by any means.
We have a lot of other things to talk about, but I do want to ask you, Pete, what does this conversation do to the talk that we've heard pop up over the years about a downtown baseball stadium? Does this in any way impact that?
I think it brings it back to the forefront because, to all the points that my colleagues have made, anytime this is happening, these people are going to ask for something. They're going to use the leverage that they have, and their leverage is Las Vegas, it's Charlotte, it's San Antonio, and if they can get a dime out of taxpayers for a downtown ballpark, they're at least going to ask, and I don't blame them for asking. The question is, what is the hard line the city's going to take on it?
Very quickly, the debate about the downtown baseball stadium is going to emerge over the next 10 years. The other thing to remember is that Sherman is part of the Cleveland Indians. As I mentioned, they've got a downtown ballpark. So he would be predisposed to it, I think.
Now, speaking of baseball, while we were away for our summer membership drive, Wyandotte County officials sending an eviction notice to the T-Bones. Apparently, the minor league team had missed 45 monthly payments on their lease at the publicly owned stadium they play in, sandwiched between the Legends, the Speedway, and Nebraska Furniture Mart in KCK. The team has until September 13th at 5 p.m. to remove all of their belongings. Are there plans to bring baseball back, or are county officials going to find a new use for the stadium?
I think they're going to try like the devil to find a new owner, and I don't know how you sell an independent baseball team, minor league at the lowest level, that's got a $700,000 nut attached to it.
Yeah, that's true. The thing to keep in mind, Nick, is that there are people around the country who love baseball for baseball. They just love the game, and they're the kind of people who would go to a T-Bones game just because they like to see the game played. But in Kansas City, that group of baseball fans is very small. Kansas City prefers a winner, somebody they know, somebody they recognize, and in that sense, the T-Bones were probably always doomed. There just aren't enough people, particularly that far out, that want to go see baseball for baseball.
But there is talk, though.
So it's hard to got a winning season right now.
Right, but so what I'm saying is it's hard to find someone else stepping forward and saying, in essence, yeah, I'll shoulder these losses going forward. So I think baseball in Wyandotte County is in serious trouble.
But there are other uses for a stadium like that. You could do concerts, you can do Little League games there, I'm assuming.
You could do all sorts of things. And people, I mean, they love that facility. That's actually the number one thing that you'll hear. People might not know that they're winning right now, but they'll remember some family outing that they had there, and it feels very old school. It feels like the downtown municipal that my parents used to talk about.
There's certainly a charm to minor league baseball. Yes. They're not going to play little league baseball there for a bunch of reasons, but they could play high school and college ball there because the dimensions work.
The last time we did this program, our top story was about a 25-year-old Overland Park woman who was shot to death while attending the popular First Fridays event in the Crossroads. Elected leaders and media outlets were calling it a wake-up call for the community. Since then, there have been 16 more murders, and we've now hit 100 homicides in the city. Has anything changed?
Not really. Mayor Quinton Lucas, has proposed, and the city has adopted some minor changes, no pun intended, about the possession of weapons and transfer of weapons as municipal violations. And I think the city and the police chief and the prosecutor are again looking at ways to staunch the violence. Now, Governor Parson in Missouri is taking enormous heat because he's called a special session for next week, or September 9th, dealing with used car sales taxes. And the calls for him to do something about gun laws on a state level is very high, and he's taking some real shots for not pursuing that.
You say the gun changes, the two ordinances passed at City Hall this week that would prevent a minor from possessing a handgun, or also for the sale of a handgun to a minor. Some people think that's a big deal, that this will allow, if people, the police will now have an opportunity to arrest minors and then allow them to have counselling, which they've not been able to do before, and that puts them on a good path. Pete.
I think it's anything will help at this point, right? And I'm okay with the mayor looking at this and at least not doing what his predecessor did, which was kind of throw his hands up and say, point at Jeff City. He's at least looking at minor things he can do. I'm more than okay with that. Do I think this drastically changes anything? No, but you know, if it can help a little bit, then I'm all for it. But it is, I mean, this is a massive issue that's more of a Marshall Plan thing than it is anything state or local.
Mary.
Actually, that's a very good term for it, a Marshall Plan thing. And I do think there is some momentum in that people are so angry and so fed up. I know that, you know, the young lady who was murdered down there, Church of the Resurrection, she was a member of. And they are planning to be down at First Friday come September in full force just to say, we're not standing for this. You're not scaring us away. No, we stand with our deceased member. There's a lot of things going on. I'm not really as mad at the governor for not calling a session on this. And I understand that it's, you know, you can criticize because of what he did call one for, but this is a bigger, broader issue. And if the governor and the legislature are really going to tackle it, we need to change some minds down there or change some people who are in office. And that doesn't happen in one special session.
You're exactly right, Mary. The Black Caucus of Missouri is going to meet with the governor this coming Tuesday to talk about this. They want this discussed at that special session. They concede probably nothing will happen at this special session, but they want it out there. And this is coming from a couple of different areas, not only in Kansas City, but they're having a terrible problem with kids getting murdered over in St. Louis. Their congressman had a town hall meeting on that. When's the last time you heard of a congressman doing that? So there's pressure on this both ends. Governor Parson is promising to take this up in the regular session. Let's see what the conservative legislature does. A lot of people think, you know, let's at least have a voice on this during a very short special session. Nothing's going to get done on it, but there's some momentum.
Yes. Sure. Pete, but why does the governor, though, think that a special session would be an inappropriate place to discuss something like gun violence? It would be just too complicated?
It's too surface area. I mean, it'll look good on paper. It'll make people feel like they're doing something. But that's exactly what's going on right now, right? I mean, on both sides of the state, everyone is trying to implement a little law here, a little law there, which is fine. And I understand it. When you're sitting in front of a grieving mother saying, do something about this, you want to do something. But doing something is not going to be solved at a 2-week special session. You can absolutely criticize why they're having one right now, but having one for this is just going to be to appease people.
Now, here's the opposite argument, which I tried to make in the pages of the paper. If you limited a special session to just talking about gun violence, the chances are you wouldn't get something, but there is a chance you would have a breakthrough because that's all you would be dealing with. The people who are saying do it in a regular session are really hoping that the passions cool, attention moves on to other things, everyone gets bored with the subject of gun violence, then you reconvene in 2020, and then you have a whole range of things you want to bring up in an election year, and you can say, as you can in Missouri and happens all the time, well, we just ran out of time. We had so many other things to deal with, we never got to guns. That's why I think there is some focus on a special session to at least show the people in St. Louis and Kansas City that you actually care when kids are getting killed.
And quickly, the prospect of Missouri legislators doing something on guns in the state of Missouri, which is a gun rights state, in an election year, as you say, Dave, is I believe slim and none.
So far, Mike Parson has been getting some positive reviews as governor, but are those warm and supportive feelings about to subside now that he prepares to announce he is running for his first full term as the state's top elected official? You may recall he only became governor because his predecessor, Eric Greitens, resigned. Missouri State Auditor Nicole Galloway, a Democrat, recently announced she's campaigning against Parson, and this week he's been primaried as a Republican lawmaker from Cameron in northwest Missouri says he's going to challenge Parson. But what has Parson done so terribly wrong that even Republicans want to run against him, Pete?
Nothing. I think there's still some people upset with how the whole Greitens thing went. I'm not sure why, but they're out there. And, Mike Parson is not somebody who's got, in today's political environment, some great base from anywhere in the party. He's just kind of a guy that does his job, does it relatively well, and he's not somebody who's going to stir up emotions, frankly, from either side. So he's kind of an old-school politician in that sense, but some people just don't care for him because of how he got to office.
I think so, too. I think he just doesn't drive a conversation, unfortunately, and it's really not anything against him. Some people perhaps, who want to seek the higher office just see an opportunity and that maybe he's someone who they could possibly beat.
And certainly Nicole Galloway is running into the race. And the tip of the hat to that was the fact that the abortion law that Mike Parson signed, by the way, Missouri's new abortion law was supposed to go into effect this week. Now it won't after a federal judge blocks the abortion law, which prevents abortions after 8 weeks. The court did, though, upheld another section of the law preventing abortions based on sex, race, or Down syndrome. Now, this seems hard to believe, but are there really abortions taking place in Missouri based on race or gender, Mary?
I would hope not, no. Doctors don't ask that question. That's not part, because that's part of Roe, is that you have the right to this so that you don't have to quantify why you are going about this process. I think most people, though, would obviously not want that sort of thing to occur.
Right. The judge that Howard Sachs that heard this case this week, asked those questions.
Yeah.
So. And nobody could provide any answers. Yeah. So when he wrote his opinion, he said, I'm open to hearing more about this, but I didn't get much information about whether or not people actually say, well, I wanted a boy, and instead I'm getting a girl. He
did say in his ruling he would listen to arguments on that part of the law if somebody wanted to refile. The most interesting part of it, though, Nick, is the Down syndrome part for me, because obviously, choosing an abortion for race or gender, no one's going to actually say, well, I wanted a girl, I'm getting a boy. I mean, that just doesn't. But Down syndrome is identifiable in utero, as you know. And so it's interesting as to whether or not that would be, in effect, prima facie evidence of getting an abortion for that reason if the fetus showed that chromosomal abnormality. So that will be the subject of some litigation, you would think, and may make its way all the way to the Supreme Court.
But even the rest of the law, though, this is only a temporary halt to this. Does that mean we're going to be continuing on this issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue into the next year's election?
I think absolutely this is going to roll on for months. Both sides are going to fight it. Obviously a ton of money behind the Planned Parenthood organization, and the Republicans in Missouri are going to fight this thing.
And ultimately, do we end up deciding that at the ballot box in 2020?
Possibly. Here's the other thing. The state's defense, I thought, was very interesting. They did not really attack or defend the gestational age restrictions in this. They attacked the fact that whether or not Planned Parenthood had the legal standing to even bring the suit, because they said, it's a woman's right to have an abortion. It is not Planned Parenthood's right to perform abortions. And that was the main attack by the state.
The judge threw that right out.
Sure. Right out.
First paragraphs. This is ridiculous. Get out of here.
Yeah, but it was an interesting line of argument.
But will we end up deciding this in 2020?
I doubt it. It is possible. I mean, you could end up getting it on the ballot. But I think the main thing to realize is that Missouri is just one of many, many states that is trying to push a law all the way up to the Supreme Court to challenge Roe v. Wade. And so we are part of this whole unit of states led generally by Republican attorney generals to push the law.
Very quickly, I believe, Mary, that it will come up on the election in this sense at the very least, and maybe a referendum. But the Galloway campaign will make it most definitely an issue during her challenge to Parson or whomever the nominee is.
Women are angry. I mean, that is one thing that you hear in conversations that, and let's put it this way, here, next year is the 100-year anniversary of women getting the right to vote, and that is very much on many women's minds.
Don't forget, by the way, that Kansas and the Kansas legislature will almost certainly try to put a measure on the ballot to amend the state's constitution in that state.
Absolutely.
After the Supreme Court decision that in essence said there's a constitutional, Kansas constitutional right to an abortion, and there could be a referendum or an initiative petition in Missouri that would put it on the ballot as well.
What happened to party loyalty in Kansas? Why are Republicans sabotaging one of their own? You may have seen some of the headlines about a so-called whisper campaign being waged against Kansas Congressman Steve Watkins from Topeka. He represents the 2nd District, which is pretty much all of eastern Kansas outside of Johnson and Wyandotte counties. The former Republican governor of Kansas, Jeff Collier, is now even encouraging other members of the GOP to run against Watkins. What has he done so terribly wrong, Pete?
Well, he wasn't a pick of the people that, in the 2nd District and the pick of the people in Topeka. He was someone who was funded by his father. There was no coalition there. There was no outside money there, so to speak. There was no coalition building. He has not done that since getting into office. The Republicans view it as what should be a safe seat. Watkins barely won it. He won it by 2 points. Trump won the district by 20. This they view as their chance to try to primary him, whether it's a Jake LaTurner or somebody else. There's a lot of rumors there right now. I think Jake will ultimately get in. He's running for U.S. Senate at this point. So it's just a chance for them to get the right guy in there that they like.
How unusual is this, though, to have a former governor now try to get somebody else to run against another Republican?
Oh, it happens all the time. No, it's most unusual, and I'm led to believe that LaTurner next week, this coming week, will drop out of the Senate race and make the race for the Kansas 2nd, and so there will be a primary. Pete's evaluation of the landscape here, I think, is pretty accurate. Steve Watkins won this, being one of the most conservative candidates in a very conservative primary to start with, and he didn't have a broad fundraising base, but he did win, and he turned back what was a pretty strong challenge by the Democrats. The D's in 2018 really wanted that seat. They thought they had a shot.
Okay. Is this unfair, though, to Steve Watkins? I mean, nobody's saying what the issue is. I got an email from him this morning. He's looking for money. So he is still trying to run for the seat. I mean, he must have had some accomplishments in Congress since he's been elected.
Well, he's just a freshman, but freshmen typically don't accomplish much. You're supposed to hold town halls and go back and cast votes in the right way. But it is unfair in this sense that if someone has something about Steve Watkins that needs to be public, it should be made public, and it has not yet. I think what you're seeing, Nick, though, is nervousness among some Republicans that a disqualifying piece of information will emerge about Steve Watkins sometime next year, and that will make it harder to hold the seat. And so they're trying to nudge him now, before that information becomes public, so that they can line up their ducks to have a candidate.
But the Watkins operation has called the bluff on this, and they said, if you've got something, show it. And nobody has stepped up to do that yet. And they have said inside of Republican politics in Kansas, show me the money, show me the evidence, show me, and they're calling the bluff, but nobody's stepping up.
Just quickly, Mike, wouldn't you agree, and maybe Pete and Mary, wouldn't you agree that Jeff Collier would not step out and make this statement about Jake LaTurner unless he felt that whatever is happening in that race is important? I mean, that's really
no question about
risk.
It could be also
former governor.
It could be also as simple as going back to Pete's point for a second. They don't believe that he is the strong enough candidate, and that he's vulnerable.
And by the way, you also solve the Senate problem if you get Jake LaTurner out by clearing that field.
But just to both of their points, they're both very good, which is that Watkins is not somebody who has been able to find. I heard he had an event in Topeka, and nobody showed up. This was for state senators and state representatives. Nobody showed up. It's a problem for him right now. And if there is these rumors that are floating out there, then it makes total sense to get ahead of it.
In fairness, though, that was the same night we were running Mannheim Steamroller during our membership drive. So we were going to take the crowds that evening. It was a bad night. In a program like this, we can tackle only a handful of the top headlines. What was the biggest story we missed? Was it the arrival of Kansas City's 6th streetcar and the promises of much shorter wait times? Was it celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay announcing he's heading to the Metro?
I'm teaming up with Caesars Entertainment to open a Gordon Ramsay steak at Harrah's, North Kansas City this fall. How cool is that?
How about the elephant revamp announced at your Kansas City Zoo? A major new visitor experience planned for the attraction's largest animals. Shawnee this week becomes the largest city in Johnson County to pass an ordinance protecting LGBT rights.
What about the person who does not want to bake a cake or make a t-shirt for a gay pride parade.
Well, I would hope that Shawnee would fling its doors open and say that it's welcome to all people.
And there's an outcry at KU and faculty threatening boycotts over Chick-fil-A. Or was it something completely different, Dave Helling?
Well, I think the story that we need to talk a lot about is the decision of the Port Authority to issue bonds for a Google, the center in Kansas City, and the growing tension between Quinton Lucas, the City Council, and the Port Authority and other agencies issuing tax breaks. That's going to be a big story.
Okay, I promised to add that to next week's program. Pete, who did you put down? What was the issue for you?
I think it's something that Michael reported on yesterday, which is what's going on at the airport, the shortage of minority-owned and female-owned operations and workers from KC Mo. You know, they have no wiggle room on that project to get it done by the 2023 NFL Draft, and they might have problems.
And I see a lot of City Council members now nervous about that. I will add that to next week's show too. Mary?
See, that would be my point. All of these issues are definitely ones that you could point out, but they're evolving. They're still growing. There's time to get to that. So I'm all for the elephants, only because I think people need balance in their news. And in order to keep coming back to these heavy issues like gun violence, they need to know that we're also taking care of some of the things that are for everyone.
Which is why I added to the program. Thank you, Mary. Michael, last word to you.
Pretty nervy move trying to build a steakhouse in Kansas City. That's all I'm saying.
But he is British, and you know the British are amazing cooks. It's just the way it is.
Yeah,
okay. That, ladies and gentlemen, alrighty, is our Week in Review. Our thanks to this week's news reviewers from KMBC 9 News, Michael Mahoney, and from the Kansas City Star, Dave Helling, Mary Sanchez with the Tribune News Service, and weekday morning 6 to 10 on KCMO Talk Radio, Pete Mundo. And I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your Labor Day holiday with us.